On today's video, we're going to turn this gorgeous fast Commodore 286-16 into an early multimedia PC. Multimedia PCs became a thing in the 486 era, as you may have seen in the Aptiva video, link in the description. But it was actually fully possible to use a 386, or even a 286 if it was super fast like this Commodore. We have previously repaired the motherboard in this machine and overclocked it from 16 to 20 MHz. Link to the repair video in the description too. To my big surprise, this video also turned into a pretty epic overclock, as you will see towards the end of this video. Okay, so this good looking machine here is the Commodore 286-16, one of the last machines that Commodore made before they started to licensing the brand. I found this machine in mint condition, but with a very nasty VARTA bomb inside, so that's why we have repaired it in a previous video. I just realized we haven't even peeled this machine. It still has the protective plastic over the badge, and this machine still looks pretty much brand new. It has a sticker underneath, but it only says Commodore 286-16, made in Taiwan. And inside here it also looks absolutely brand new. Everything is nice and shiny. This Commodore came with just one card installed, so this is the original graphics card. It's nothing special. So we are probably going to replace it. I think we used it with an ET4000 when we used it last time. So this machine has a TDK board with chipsets from chips. It has a bunch of RAM chips on the motherboard and then 4 additional SIMs to take 5 megs of RAM, I think. That should be sufficient for some DOS adventure games. I also plan to run an early version of Windows on this machine, but 5 megs should be sufficient for that version of Windows too. To overclock this machine we need to get the motherboard out. And here's that nice and shiny hard drive that makes those funky vintage sounds. It's an ST157A. The motherboard has built-in ID and floppy controller. It's a standard motherboard, so it doesn't have any MOS branded chips, like the Commodore PC-10 for instance. The riser has 16-bit slots on this side and 8-bit slots on the other side. I found the board on the retro web, so we have all the jumper settings. There are quite a few on this board actually. Okay, so apparently put the original crystal back in. Probably needed that 40 MHz crystal to test the motherboard. But I left the 20 MHz Harris in, and as you can see the motherboard looks like it just left the factory, except for this corner down here. But it seems we did a pretty good job of cleaning it up because there was corrosion all over this corner here. I think we only replaced some damaged pin headers and repaired one trace going to this chip here, and then installed a regular coin cell holder instead of that nasty VARTA. But with a nice board like this, I actually think it deserves a better installation of that coin cell. So before we start overclocking, let's take care of this. There's nothing really wrong fixing the board like this, with a diode on the side. But it doesn't look great, and the holder is just sitting on the board here. So if I mistakenly push on it when I mess around with the board, there's a good chance I could push it off the pads. So we are going to need some help from the sponsor of this video, PCB. So we've got a bunch of these boards. I'll put some information on the screen here where you can find this project. At the back here we can see the repair we had to do. So this VIA has a trace inside the board going to this pad here. And apparently the corrosion had killed it, so we installed jumper wire here. We also cleaned up a few traces and tinned them. Okay, now this is interesting. So we fixed this board about a year ago. We now have some fresh corrosion here. So I must have missed a tiny splash of that battery juice here. So I guess that tells us how important it is to clean and wash the board proper after a battery damage. So I guess I'll clean it up today instead. Let's start by removing that coin cell holder. The budge wire is attached to one of the pads for the battery, so we'll put it back on later. And this board has whole set of pads for different sizes of batteries. Okay, I did a test fit here and I think there's just about room enough for it here. And if you don't have room enough for this coin cell holder on your board, There is also a vertical version of this PCB. It's the same thing, but it's using one of these vertical holders instead. So you get the coin cell standing up like this. But on this board here, I think we have just about room enough for it. It will touch the SIM slots, but that doesn't matter, of course. These boards can take 4 different types of diodes, and I really need to order some surface mount diodes for these. Apparently I forgot, so instead I'm going to pre-cut the legs of a through-hole diode. And then I'm going to solder it on the wrong side of the PCB. This way the board will remain flush on the other side, and the coin cell holder will sit flush on the PCB too. I'm going to pre-cut these legs too, so I can install the PCB as close to the motherboard as possible. I'm going to solder the pin headers on the wrong side of the PCB too, and that makes for a neat installation of the coin cell holder. Okay, and this is what the contraption looks like, assembled and ready to be installed on the board. And the contraption, of course, now fits the through holes designed for the VARTA battery. Okay, it actually ended up on top of the SIM slot here, but that doesn't really matter, so I'm going to leave it like this. It's not touching any of the pins, so I think this is going to be okay. Okay, the PCB is now soldered to the board, and it sits very firmly. And that is one of the 2 reasons why I like these, because my hacked version of this was only soldered to one of the pads. So if you would have pushed on the battery by accident, there's a pretty good chance you would rip that pad off the board. But these guys here, they are really firmly installed. And the other reason, of course, is that this looks really neat. If you go with green PCBs, you wouldn't even notice the PCB underneath the battery. And if you need a set of these too, just go to the GitHub page and download the Gerber files. And then you can go to PCBWay.com. Go to Instant Quotes and upload the Gerber files. If you want to, you can change the PCB to your favorite color, and then just save to cart and place your order. And that is how easy it is. These Commodores are actually pretty fast 286s as they are. This machine is actually twice the speed of the original AT, but we always want more, don't we? So in the repair video of this machine, we installed the Harris 20 MHz and swapped that crystal for a 40 MHz crystal. And apparently this board ran happily at 20 MHz too. Now that is a seriously fast 286. But since I made that video, I actually ordered an even faster Harris. So let's get this guy out of the socket. First I'll use some deoxit in that original socket, and then I'll install a 25 MHz Harris instead. I'll do the first test with the original crystal, just to make sure that this chip is good. Before we try to run it faster, I cleaned up the tiny splasher of corrosion at the back of the board. And after this video, I'm going to give this board a nice bath in warm soapy water to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Okay, board installed and secured with a couple of screws. Let's turn the machine on. We've got messed up graphics, but we actually have this in the repair video too. That was just a bad connection on the graphics card. So I'll quickly fix it off camera with some deoxit. Yep, that totally fixed it. I just cleaned the edge connector on the graphics card, and the machine now posts. So that Harris chip and everything else seems to be good. Now let's replace that crystal with a 50 MHz crystal. Divided by 2, this is going to give the CPU 25 MHz. That's a pretty insane step from 16. Okay, fingers crossed. Here goes. Oh, it posts. We are getting a bunch of errors. Diskette drive and hard drive failure. That is expected, because they are disconnected. Let's try with F1. No boot device available. So let's just quickly jump into BIOS. Yeah, now I remember. This BIOS has a very annoying thing. You can't type in the date, so you have to use the arrow keys. So let's set it to 1996, just as a test. We'll set all the values correctly later. And F10. And after the reboot, it still says 1996 here. So the VARTA replacement board works too. Awesome. Okay, diskette drive and hard drive connected. Here goes. Okay, still posting. And F2 for setup. Setup will automatically correct errors. Yes, please. Actually it didn't. So drive A is incorrectly set to 360K drive. So let's change it to 1.44 meg drive. Not sure which type of drive this is, so I would have to look this up. But let's go with this for now and see if it works. Display is also incorrectly set to CGA. So let's change it to VGA. And CPU speed is set to low. So that means it boots in turbo mode. Let's leave it like this for now and change it later. And I'm just gonna hit F10. Okay, so those drive settings were incorrect. I'm gonna have to look it up. Okay, so this drive is an ST157A. Let me see if I can find it in the lists. No match. This is not the best BIOS. It's not obvious how to set the hard drive manually. Here we go. So that was just pure luck. By pushing arrow down, it jumped to cylinder instead of moving down in the list. So we've got 560 cylinders, 6 heads and 26 sectors, giving us a total of 42 megs. Now let's save and reboot. Well, that's weird. I'm pretty sure we installed DOS on this hard drive. Let me try with a diskette. But I also remember that this machine came with a virus. So maybe I wiped that drive. No, I didn't. So why didn't it boot? That's a bit strange. Or does this machine still has that virus? I can't quite remember if we removed it. And it was actually a boot sector virus. So that would explain why it doesn't boot. But let's ignore that for now and fix it later. Okay, so we are running at 12 MHz. So we have actually not overclocked this machine yet. So let's push that turbo switch. Try that again. It didn't switch immediately. Well, that's weird behavior. I was expecting the machine to switch to 25 MHz. Let's see what else we have on the hard drive. Let's try SpeedSys. It doesn't work on a 286. How about landmark system speed test 6? Okay, and in here too, it's clearly running at 12 MHz. So how about if we push that turbo switch and press F9? No, still at 12 MHz. This board behaves a bit strangely. So how the heck do we change the speed? Let's jump into BIOS and check. This BIOS is a bit difficult to see on camera. But down here, CPU speed is set to low. So let's change it to high and save. And reboot the machine. Now let's try landmark 6.0 again. Okay, still at 12 MHz. How bizarre. Why is it behaving like this? This doesn't make any sense. Let me push that turbo switch again. Oh, now it jumped up to 26. But the clock speed is still set to 12 MHz. And it's clearly telling us that this machine is behaving like an AT running at 27 MHz. Holy crap. And for some strange reason I'm getting incorrect information here. So if I push the turbo switch, it jumps down to 13. And with the turbo switch pushed in, it jumps up to 26. Holy cow, this machine is running at 25 MHz. That is a hell of an overclock. But I guess we need to check if it's stable before we celebrate. Okay, here goes. Oh no, it won't even start. Well, too bad it wasn't stable. But still, the fact that the board would run at 25 MHz is pretty impressive for a 16 MHz machine. I guess we could go silly and start swapping components on the motherboard to see if we can make it stable. But I'm not sure. The chipset is clearly marked on this board that it's rated for 16 MHz. What do you guys think? Should we go silly or should we just be happy with 20 MHz? Which definitely isn't bad. This is my fastest 286 with a pretty good margin. Okay, so next I ran a bunch of benchmarks and made sure that this machine really is stable at 20 MHz, and it definitely is. I haven't had a single crash or any issues at all. The machine runs and performs perfectly at this speed. Before we can move on to the next step in this project, we need some more RAM. According to the manual, we've got 1 megs here with regular dip chips. And now I have added 4 additional SIMs, 1 megs each. And I have moved all the jumpers in this whole row of pin headers. So now this board should have 5 megs of RAM, which is more than sufficient for pretty much anything you can do with a 286. Okay, it's counting up a bit more RAM than we had before. It's not quite correct here. So either the manual is incorrect or something isn't quite right set in the BIOS, because we're missing about 1/3 of a meg here. And actually I don't think I'm going to bother correcting this. 4.6 megs is more than I need. So I'm just going to leave it like this and ignore this minor issue here. Being a clone, I'm going to go with an ESS 1868 card for this build. This is the card that we repaired in one of the PS1 videos. But I ended up using a different card in that machine. But for this build, it's pretty perfect. It also has pin headers for a CD-ROM. These cards are pretty good clones. I also looked through the documentation for this machine, and the video card is indeed the original card for this machine. So I have decided to keep it in this build. Despite it being a bit slow, I don't think I'm going to need very fast graphics for the games I'm going to play on this machine. So leaving this card in makes perfect sense. Well, if this Commodore is going to be an early multimedia machine, it's going to need a CD-ROM drive. I went through my stash and I found a drive that has a similar color to the original diskette drive. The color match is not perfect, but it's close enough. Well, I just spent an entire evening troubleshooting this stupid CD-ROM drive, and although this card has proper ID, it still wouldn't work. So I ended up bringing out a whole stack of CD-ROM drives and sound cards and checked them for compatibility. And to my big surprise, most drives and cards are actually incompatible, at least with the stash I have. I thought most drives were compatible with most sound cards, so that kind of sucks. And the only sound card that is compatible with this drive is the CT2910. It's the card we used for the PC35 video. Unfortunately, this CD-ROM drive decided to give me some trouble. The drive sled is now jammed. Now, we've had this before, twice actually, caused by 2 different faults. So let's see if we can fix this drive too. This drive, by the way, is an LG CRD8322B from December of 1998. So not a perfect period correct match, but since the color on the front panel matches, I'm gonna go with this drive anyways. So first we need to eject the sled. Turn it upside down and remove the front bezel. That usually sits with 2 tabs, like so. And then we need to push on these tabs to remove the entire front panel. And now we can remove this panel completely. With 4 of the screws removed from underneath the drive, we can remove the lid. So let's turn the drive around and remove this plate. Oh, maybe I'm wrong here, because the other drive with the stuck sled had a sticky rubberized paint on this disc here. This drive has a rubber thingy instead, and it's not sticky. Huh. Oh, actually, this plate here has gone sticky. So here we have the issue. So I think this rubber part here has released some plasticizer that has now ended up on this disc and made it all sticky. So when I try to eject the drive, I think this part here gets stuck to this rubber pad. So this is probably our issue. And this should be an easy fix. I'll just use some IPA and clean this disc. And now it's not sticky anymore. So this was probably a pretty easy fix. I might as well clean this disc too. Yeah, something here came off that disc. Probably a plasticizer. Well, I guess we should check that belt too. Actually, it is a bit loose. So this belt may actually need a replacement too. But I'm going to leave it in for now, because I want to know what caused this issue. I don't like to fix 2 different things at once. So I'm going to leave it in and do some tests. And if the sled gets jammed again, I'm going to replace this belt, because it looks suspiciously loose, but I'm not 100% sure here, so it needs more testing. We better check the condition of the caps inside here too. Well, they're not leaking yet, but these are surface mount caps from 1998, so I'm actually going to order a set of caps for this drive. Okay, our next challenge is to install an OS on this Commodore. I say challenge because this machine came bundled with a Commodore MS-DOS 401, and we've had nothing but trouble with this version of DOS. We have tried before and failed miserably, so let's insert a disk, fire the machine up. Oh no, we've got a diskette read failure. Let's try with a cleaning disk. Okay, now the drive reads. Commodore keyboard driver version 1.5. But I'm actually going to exit the installation here and run fdisk. And then I'm going to delete the primary partition. And then create a new partition. And now we can start fresh with the clean hard drive. And we can choose here between minimum balanced and maximum function. Let's go with this one. Choose the drive to install. Well, the installer is quite different from other versions of DOS. How many printers do you have? 0. And I'm gonna skip the DOS shell. Not a fan. Before proceeding, select needs to make a copy of the install diskette. Well, I don't really need a copy. Let's see if we can skip it. No, this was not optional. So I'm forced to make a copy of the install diskette. That's a bit rude. What if I don't need a copy? Okay, that disk copy was actually quite annoying. I had to swap between the two disks a whole bunch of times. Now it's finally finished and it's formatting the drive. Okay, installation of MS-DOS 4 is complete. So the issue with DOS 4 is that it lacks high mem sys. Now an easy fix would of course be to just install DOS 5. But since this is going to be a multimedia machine, we are going to install Windows 3.0 multimedia version. And this version of Windows also includes high mem sys. But the last time we tried this, it actually didn't work, because I didn't have this diskette here. These machines, by the way, came bundled with a regular Windows 3.0. But I found a copy at archive.org and burned it to disk. Regular Windows 3.0 came on regular floppies, but this version came on a CD. And it was actually never sold separately. Microsoft only made it available for OEMs. So that's probably why you have never heard of this version. Okay, here we are in DOS 4.01. So the first thing we need to do is to install the CD-ROM drive. So first we're going to need MSCD-EX EXE. And good old Oak CD-ROM sys doesn't work on 286s. At least not when I have tried. So I'm going to use this driver here instead. I'm also going to cheat and copy edit.com from a DOS 622 diskette. Because I'm too lazy to use edlin, and to make it work in this version of DOS, we also need QBasic EXE. And this way we can easily edit the AUTOEXEC batch file and the config sys. Okay, I added a line for MSCD-EX in the AUTOEXEC batch file. So let's save and exit. Okay, next I added these two lines to config sys. I forgot to copy mouse.sys to my DOS folder. And as you can see, we don't have high mem sys here yet. So let's save and exit. And I'll make a copy of mouse.sys to the DOS folder too. And reboot the machine. Okay, installing CD-ROM device driver. This is looking good. And it has successfully been installed as drive D. Let's jump over to the CD-ROM. And I think the installer is in the MWin folder. Yep, totally is. And as you can see, this is not a regular Windows 3.0. This is the Multimedia Extension 1.0 version. So I think this version of Windows is specifically designed for the Sound Blaster Pro. And the CT2910 we installed in the machine is the Sound Blaster 16 Pro. So let's hope this is going to work. Well, I think I forgot to mention, but this machine actually has a PS2 connector, and it has recognized my IBM PS2 mouse, so we can just move on. Okay, and then we are prompted for the settings for the Sound Blaster Pro card. So this is looking pretty good, and all the default values were correct. And the installer is now copying all the files. Okay, and it switched to graphical interface. I'm gonna skip the printer, no printing today. And I'm gonna skip the readme. And it continues to copy files. File manager, clipboard, control panel, notepad. Those files are just flying at 20 megahertz. I tend to go with Windows 3.11 on my retro machines. So I've actually not used this version of Windows since back in the day. And I was installing a bunch of multimedia stuff. So we've got sample movie files, MIDI files and sound files. Not included in the regular version. And now it's installing the fonts. I think this version of Windows only have something like 5 fonts. So pretty basic OS. And it even has a custom splash screen here. Windows with multimedia setup. So let's search the drive for apps. Okay, and in here we actually have some interesting stuff. Pro Mixer, SB Chatter, and SB Jukebox. I have no idea what this is. Link utility. Let's grab it anyways and find out later. Okay, and apparently it's not happy with append exe, so we need to remove it from the AUTOEXEC batch file before we continue. Okay, and it's ready to write to the config sys and AUTOEXEC batch file. So let's go with this option here because then we can remove the line for append exe. Okay, so let's remove that line. Maybe I should remove it here and continue. Okay, and we are ready to reboot the machine. So let's jump into config sys. Check this out. Now we've got HiMemSys. Oh, perhaps I should have mentioned earlier. So without HiMemSys, the machine is pretty much completely useless for DOS gaming. So that's why it's so important. So let's type Win. Microsoft Windows Graphical Environment with Multimedia Extension 1.0. And this is now a true 286 multimedia machine. Kinda makes me wonder if it would have been super successful back in the day, if they just had released it for anyone to buy. Now let's check out some of the features. So at the first glance it is very similar to later versions of Windows. And by later versions I mean 3.1 and 3.11. So we've got good old Solitaire. That's awesome. But I got a really crappy start here. So let's skip it for now. And we've got FNIRSI, which I think they removed in the next version of Windows. Okay, and here we have the media player. Let's fire it up and see if we have some sample files. So we've got one folder here named mmdata. Let's check it out. Yeah, here's Canyon Mid. Oh, I just realized I need to plug in an audio cable. Yeah, totally works. So it seems to be pretty happy with that sound card. Despite it being a Sound Blaster 16. Okay, so I think we might have more sample files on the CD. So we've got a hyper folder. Nothing in here. Okay, so these are MIDI files. Let's change this to all. I was hoping to find sample video file. Here it is. Sample MMM. So this is the video file format for Windows 3.0. Cannot open file or device. That kind of sucks. We didn't say why. So do we have a good enough graphics card in this machine to play one of those sample files? And there's only one file to choose from. Okay, I'm checking the minimum hardware requirements to run that file. And it requires a 286 running at 10 MHz. And we're running at 20, so that should be okay. We need 2 megs of RAM, and we've got 5. And then we need a hard drive, and a VGA compatible graphics card, and a sound card. And apparently a pointing device. Okay, so unfortunately that is gonna have to remain a mystery. Maybe it needs more VRAM or something. So that kind of sucks. That would be kind of a typical thing to run. on an early multimedia machine. Okay, so then we've got a music box, and it just looks like a media player that can do playlists. So that's pretty neat. Now you have to remember we're back at 1991, so everything is of course pretty crude. Okay, then we've got a jukebox, and it's another media player for MIDI files, and it has a playlist too. That's pretty neat. Then we have a Sound Blaster Pro mixer, and all of this stuff eventually became standard on PCs. Well, that is what you would expect it to be. Windows 3.0 with some multimedia features added. Well, I just did a partial edit and noticed my mistake. And you guys know me, I leave my mistakes in. So apparently it was a 20 MHz Harris chip in my bag of 25 MHz Harris. So we actually ran a 20 MHz Harris 286 at 25 MHz. So we need to do some more overclocking. Okay, 25 MHz Harris installed, and a 50 MHz crystal, and I fired up landmark system speed tests. Things are looking a bit different here now. When we ran this board with a 50 MHz crystal and a 20 MHz Harris, it actually said 12 MHz here, but now it says 25 MHz. But the CPU is running at 13. We also have a much higher score for the video here, and that is because I installed a different video card. Okay, let's push that turbo switch and see what happens. Okay, it jumped up to 26.8, but we actually got this far with a 20 MHz Harris 2. So, let's jump out. Huh. Seems to be something wrong with my copy of 3D Bench. Access denied. That's weird. Or is this an overclocking issue? I'll push that turbo switch again. Access denied. No, there's something wrong with the copy. So I'll just make a fresh copy on the hard drive. One file copied. This machine is misbehaving, and we're actually running it at 12 MHz at the moment. Or maybe this is just a bug in DOS 4, who knows. Access denied. How bizarre. Let's run it from the floppy. Maybe there's something wrong with this diskette. Now the software is running from the diskette, so there's nothing wrong with my copy. So I have no idea why DOS 4 doesn't give me access to that folder. That's just bizarre. But we can just run it like this. So now we are running at 12 MHz, since I have pressed the turbo switch. These benchmarks are more suitable for a 486, but I don't really have a good benchmark for 286 systems, if there is such a thing. Okay, and we've got a score of 3.6. Now let's push that turbo switch again. Okay, it didn't crash. Let's relaunch it. Okay, it's actually running. So we did not get this far with the wrong CPU. Okay, fingers crossed. Let's see if the system is stable at 25 MHz. This is kind of silly. This machine is only made to run at 16 MHz. And the chipset is actually marked 16 MHz. And yet it runs stable at 20. But how about 25? I think this is as fast as 286s ever went. I don't think there is a faster chip than this. Holy crap! It completed the benchmarks at 7.2. This is one hell of a Commodore. Seriously. So I guess we should try with a game. Let me see what I can find. Okay, and apparently the reason why I didn't get access to that file is because the diskette drive is glitchy. So it's going to need a service, but that is for another video. I have now installed the game here. Here goes. Okay, game starts. Holy cow, the game runs. And this intro is actually pretty smooth for a 286 system. I deliberately chose this game because it normally requires a 386. Holy crap, the game runs and it works. Well, this turned out to be a pretty epic overclock. Commodore sure knew how to pick a good motherboard for their 286. This Commodore 286-16 is running happily at 25 MHz and it's perfectly stable. And at this speed the game runs really smooth. This is a pretty remarkable overclock. So how about Windows? Oh, the machine actually chimed, but the volume was turned down low. Let me restart that again. Okay. Well, there you have it. A true multimedia machine. Windows even has a startup sound. Okay, so the reason why I installed a better graphics card is because I want to see if we can run that MMM file with more VRAM. If I can find it, that is... Oh, here it is. Cannot open file or device. Crap. Okay, this is a little bit strange. I was hoping to switch to 800 by 600 and 256 colors. And the graphics card I have should cope, but I can only choose 320 by 200 at 256 colors. Okay, let's boot and see how this looks. No, that did not work well. Not with this display at least. This is more like 4 colors. Probably need to install drivers for this graphics card. So let's see if we can fix it. Okay, let's go up to display and see what we've got in the list. Well, it's actually a pretty decent list of typical cards for the era, but not my GD5422. So let's go with this option here. And I found the drivers at Vogons. The only bad thing I can say about this machine is that it's really noisy. So I need to order a new fan for that power supply. This is a bit strange. IBM PS2 Model 50 color display. Let's go with this anyways. No, these are not the correct drivers. I need to search some more online. Okay, I found a different set at Winworld PC. So let's try these. Ah, here it is. Cirrus Logic GD542X version 1.1. So these were image files for 5¼ inch floppies, but I extracted them and manually placed the files on a regular diskette. Okay, now it's asking for the font diskettes. So I guess I'll try to find it. Okay, I found some fonts inside that image file too. And I placed them on the same diskette. Okay, that worked. Awesome. So the display now changed to Cirrus 542X 256 colors. So let's accept and run Windows again. And it's not syncing. I think we have a compatibility issue between that graphics card and my modern display. Okay, so let's go all vintage and try that again. This is looking good, but I need to fix that refresh rate, otherwise I'm gonna drive you nuts. I found the setres utility in that image file too and installed it on this machine, but I can only choose between 640, 800 or 1024 resolution. I can't change the refresh rate, so we're just gonna have to do this test quickly before that flickering drives you nuts. Here goes. Cannot open file or device. Crap. By the way, the CD-ROM drive works perfectly, so all that was needed was to clean that disk. And by the way, the image is perfectly stable, so that flickering is my camera is doing, unfortunately. Oh, I actually found a fix for this. So apparently at a lower resolution, I also changed the frequency to something my camera can handle, probably 60. So I'm not sure what else I could show you in here. But the most important thing here is that I have been messing around with this machine for quite a bit now. And it's definitely stable. There are no issues whatsoever. This Commodore happily runs at 25 MHz. So this turned out to be a pretty epic overclock. And that's all I had for you guys today. Before you leave, like, subscribe and leave a comment, and consider joining me on Patreon. And I'll see you guys again next week.